want to thank everyone who came out tonight and everyone watching online. To put on an event takes a lot of work, and I want to thank the people, organizations, and families for their efforts. I would like to thank the community for their active involvement. I would like to thank Communities United Against Police Brutality, Families Supporting Families Against Police Violence, Be Their Voices Minnesota, Twin Cities Coalition, Justice for Jamar, the Justice Squad, CARE Minnesota, the Racial Justice Network, the Minnesota Freedom Fund, Twin Cities Relief, and many other organizations who have helped inspire change in our community. This is a forum for questions to be answered, and if all goes well, we would like to have another forum before the election in November. I want to give a special thanks to those candidates running for Hennepin County Attorney who are here in attendance tonight. We felt it was important to have a social justice forum to open dialogue from those of us who were involved with leading social change with boots on the ground. Your willingness to be here shows your commitment to connect with all people. The narrative law enforcement puts out to the public is often not how the actual events unfolded. For those that experience what happened, this narrative often can include cover-ups, half-truths used to sway public opinion and the media. We wanted to make sure the families that have lost a loved one had a chance to be heard. I wanted to share some of the main events that have transpired in Hennepin County from our perspective, and particularly over the past 2.5 years. It does not cover everything, but it will provide context. On May 25th, 2020, George Floyd, a 46-year-old black man, was murdered in Minneapolis by Derek Chauvin, a 44-year-old white police officer. Chauvin knelt on Floyd's neck for over 9 minutes while Floyd was handcuffed and laying face down in the street. On May 26, 2020, protests were initially peaceful, but later there was vandalism of stores. At the 3rd Precinct Police Station in Minneapolis, windows were broken and the front entrance was broken into, causing police officers to fire non-lethal rounds at the crowd from the building's roof, targeting people's faces and crotches. After staff evacuated the building, it was set on fire. Police in riot gear used tear gas, flashbangs, rubber bullets, and smoke bombs. Being there, we were a community hurting and tired of our cries falling on deaf ears. In the beginning, the individuals who we saw causing the damage did not look like the people from the community. They were masked and they were well organized. Towards the end of May, a black man by the name of Jaleel Stallings was charged and found not guilty of 2 counts of second-degree attempted murder, multiple counts of assault, and other charges. As a direct result of this, officers have to answer the claims that the police used excessive force and filed false police reports when they arrested him. On June 19, 2020, Hennepin County passed a resolution declaring racism a public health crisis. On top of COVID-19 and everything else happening, it was trauma upon top of trauma in our community. On November 6, 2020, Minnesota State Patrol later announced that 646 individuals were cited and released. Hundreds of community members rallied in Cedar Riverside before marching and protesting, again trying to redress grievances within our community. Protesters had only marched for 20 minutes and were a few hundred feet from exiting when police surrounded them and held them on I-94 for 5 hours. There was no physical confrontations with police initiated by any protesters all night. On April 11, 2021, Dante Wright was murdered in Brooklyn Center by police officer Kim Potter. Dante was stopped for a traffic violation related to expired registration tags and an air freshener. With leaders on the ground, we witnessed the indiscriminate shooting of rubber bullets and tear gas at peaceful protesters, apartment buildings, and the targeting of the media and their equipment. This led to the failures and firing of the city manager and the police chief. The mayor, in an open council meeting, supported having a police department investigated by the Department of Justice for patterns and practices of misconduct. There was no de-escalation, just indiscriminate injuries and more trauma inflicted upon the community. On April 12, 2021, officials identified the police officer who shot Dante as Kim Potter of the Brooklyn Center Police Department. On the morning of April 14th, Kim Potter was charged with first and second degree murder. One of the Brooklyn Center Police Department's officials was quoted by media saying that the police department mourned the loss of Kim Potter from the profession after Potter killed Dante. Once again, our community was hurting. On April 17, 2021, Operation Safety Net started as a coordinated law enforcement response between the Minnesota National Guard, the Minnesota State Patrol, Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, and local police departments. It was originally devised to preempt potential unrest during the Derek Chauvin trial and his actions, and now those of Kim Potter. This program was used in Brooklyn Center, a city for which it was not designed, failing in its very mission and harming the community. On April 20th, 2021, the jury found Derek Chauvin guilty of all charges, including second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. He was the first white Minnesota police officer to be convicted of murdering a black person. During the month of April, the Department of Justice launched a patterns and practices investigation into the Minneapolis Police Department. The United States Attorney General Merrick Garland stated that the verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial does not address the potentially systemic policing issues in Minneapolis. On May 15, 2021, the City of Brooklyn Center passed a package of sweeping reforms to its public safety system, what the city's mayor called a new North Star for policing. We would also like to acknowledge this transformative mayor, Mayor Michael Elliott. On 12/20/2021, Kim Potter was found guilty of first-degree and second-degree manslaughter for the murder of Dante Wright. At the end of December 2021, it was reported that prosecutors must provide defendants with Brady information that could refute or disprove a defendant's guilt. The city's process for finding and producing impeachment information about Minneapolis Police Department officers was based on procedures established in 2017. The problem is the city collects this information only 4 times a year. As a result, individuals accused of crimes may consider plea deals or may even proceed to trial without the benefit of impeachment evidence, simply because the city infrequently updates its records. On February 2nd, 2022, another black man was killed. His name was Amir Locke, because of a no-knock warrant gone bad. Amir Locke had no criminal record and was a lawful gun owner. He was murdered in less than 10 seconds by 3 gunshots that were fired by law enforcement. 2 of these officers that have to answer to claims of brutality and falsifying police records were involved in the execution of Amir Locke. On February 20th, 2022, Kim Potter was sentenced to only 24 months and will serve 18 and be out by next April 2023. Kim Potter took a life and should have gotten the maximum sentence, but instead we have a system protecting itself. Keep in mind, Minnesota state sentencing guidelines called for a sentence of 86 months in prison, or over 7 years for someone who has no criminal record. Potter's legal team asked the judge for probation. After hearing impact statements, the judge fought back tears as she ruled that Potter made a tragic mistake. In modern history, we have not seen a judge more sympathetic to a defendant over a victim. This shocked the family and our community's conscience. On April 27, 2022, the Minnesota Department of Human Rights released a scathing report that outlines their 2-year investigation into whether the Minneapolis Police Department and the city engaged in a pattern of racial discrimination. Sadly, this report confirms what protesters, community leaders, and activists have been saying for a long time. It is not a level playing field for everyone. Our community members are hunted, surveilled on social media, have to deal with propaganda, are racially profiled and brutalized. Furthermore, these officers are not held accountable by leadership or their management. There is no question about racism, brutality, and blatant defiance to change. We have encountered some politicians and special interest groups that have shown that they are beholden to the institution that created this situation, and they don't care about the people whom they represent or who they're supposed to protect. We understand change is hard, but not impossible. Keep in mind, since 2003, the city of Minneapolis has paid out over $80 million in settlements, judgments, and claims stemming from allegations of police misconduct. Some of the questions this evening will be related to this timeline of events. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our moderator tonight, Toussaint Morrison. Toussaint is an Emmy Award-winning show host and has moderated intervention-based group discussions across the country for 17 years. His current community work follows in the footsteps of Mel Reeves, Nikema Levy-Armstrong, and his father, Derek Morrison. His most recent work is dedicated to the families affected by police violence and youth of color in writing and performing spoken word. With that, I'll pass the mic. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to everybody here today. We're going to kick things off pretty quickly because we do not have a lot of time. So we're going to start with introductions. We have somebody keeping time right there. And the way that this will work is you have 60 seconds for your introduction to let these people know and the cameras know who you are, what you've done, and what you stand for, and any other additional information that you'd like to provide for the people. After that, we'll get into long-form questions that will be mixed in with flash questions that are just a yes or no answer. I know that's tough. Not everybody wants to give a yes or no answer, but that's what the question is. Anything more than that, we'll call time and we have to move on. Also, mixed in with that will be questions from families affected by police violence. And if at any point you feel that some of the questions that or things that the candidates are saying for the Hennepin County District Attorney apply to you or something you want to investigate further, please raise your hand and we'll call on you right away. There will also be an entire segment dedicated to just family questions. We know that Andy Dimmick and Irma Burns is watching right now, so we'll mix that in as well with the people that are watching. So first and foremost, we're going to start from the first from you, Jarvis Jones.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, your 60 seconds is on.
Okay, can everyone hear me clearly?
Yes.
As I said, my name is Jarvis Jones. I'll start off by telling you why I'm running. I got into the race recently. The reason I'm running is twofold. First, I think we must do better. We can and must do better than what we're doing. There is no new news in the Department of Human Rights report. If you live in the communities that have been affected with the Department of Human Rights reported, you've been saying that for many, many years. I've heard that forever. It's not new news that the police department treats some folks as suspects first. Secondly, I'm running, in addition to we must change, is that we're going to have both. We need to do two things at the same time. We need to have safe streets in all neighborhoods.
It's your time. It's right in front of you right there.
Oh, I apologize.
It's okay, Jarvis, that's all right. There'll be plenty of time today. We're just getting through quick introductions. Sir Swati Singh.
Thank you. I want to thank the Minnesota Justice Coalition and all the people that were involved in putting this together. You don't have to do this, and I'm grateful that you do, because this is an important part, educating the rest of the community. My name is Switzer Singh, and I'm running for Hennepin County Attorney. My first name is pronounced Sir Swati, and my last name is Singh, as in song. I say this every time because I want you to know me. I want you to vote for me. I'm a progressive prosecutor with John Choi in Ramsey County. He's the most progressive county attorney in the state. I handle murder, sexual assault, domestic assault cases, and everything in between. I'm the only candidate in the race that's actually implemented progressive prosecution practices, especially when it comes to drugs and collateral consequences. My priorities are police accountability, racial equity, and public safety. And all three at the same time, because you cannot have justice, you cannot have safety, unless you're addressing all three. Thank you.
Thank you. Simon Troutman.
Thank you. My name is Simon Troutman. I'm a Richfield City Council member and the proud founder of Troutman Martin Law. And I also want to thank the Minnesota Justice Coalition, an organization that I'm proud to be a part of in leadership, even though I didn't have any influence or control over the forum here tonight. I do also just want to recognize and thank all the families who've been impacted by police violence, and just recognizing that your presence here is a gift not just to us but to the greater community, and you're part of a club that nobody ever wants to be a part of. And if you're wondering how I'm going to lead and why you should vote for me, you should look at how I've led and where I've been and what my presence has been, both as a government leader in the city of Richfield and also as an attorney that has tragically been present with communities and family members and parents on the nights that they've lost their loved ones to police violence. And so we have an extraordinary opportunity to bring, and that's my time.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Moriarty.
My name is Mary Moriarty, and I want to thank the Minnesota Justice Coalition and my condolences to the family here. If you recognize me, it's because I've been out there on the streets with you, protesting, marching, and I've also been out there with vigils for children who've been shot and killed. I care about everybody who's the victim of gun violence. When I was chief public defender for 6 years, our office challenged the marijuana sting, where 46 out of 47 black men were charged with selling marijuana, and we put a stop to that. I was also interested in traffic stops, and so our office collected data where we found out and publicized that for every black person who was stopped by the police and searched, the police found a gun in less than half of 1% of the time. So 99.5% of black people who were stopped and searched had nothing. I think data is really critical, and that's one thing, among others, that I will bring to being Hennepin County Attorney. Thank you.
All right. So, and these questions will kind of go all over the place, and at any point I'll be having my eye on the families and whatnot. And Amity and Irma, if you ever decide to chime in, just please say pause, and we will definitely take your question as you chime in. So for our first question, listen to it closely. What kind of accountability should law enforcement face if they obstruct, fail to disclose, or mislead on a defendant or victim of police violence? I'll repeat that. What kind of accountability should law enforcement face if they obstruct, fail to disclose, or mislead on a defendant or victim of police violence? So Swati, we'll start with you.
Thank you. And first, thanks for asking that question. I think we're so used to being gaslit that officers don't commit violence. And if they do, it's always because the other person was in the wrong. And it's important to hold police accountable. It's a big reason why I'm running. I recognize a number of you here. I've seen you at press conferences, and I'm usually in the back. I'm a prosecutor, and I know I'm different than some of the others. And I've been listening. And a prosecutor's job is to do justice. But sometimes it feels there's very little justice in the actual system. And so when police, whose job is to protect and serve, violate their oath when they lie, to protect people that they like, to hurt people that they believe are less, it's a prosecutor's obligation to hold the officers accountable. And I know that there are limits of what a prosecutor can do, but you also have power. You have this microphone. You can partner up. And when I become Hennepin County Attorney, I will partner up with the Minneapolis City Attorney. Why? Because they get many of the cases the Minneapolis Police Department has. And there's many police departments in the Hennepin County, but the Minneapolis Police Department has a huge problem. If any of you have not read the report, they call people that are black monkeys, the N-word, they call Hispanic. I won't go into all of it.
That's time. Simon Troutman, what kind of accountability should law enforcement face if they obstruct, fail to disclose, or mislead on a defendant or victim of police violence?
Thank you for the question. There are several different spaces where accountability is urgent and overdue. The first one is obviously in the prosecutor's office, who's obligated not just to prosecute, but also to create systems where it doesn't just rely on the will of one person, but you have a system and culture of accountability. Part of that accountability comes from the recognition and the certainty that crimes by law enforcement will be prosecuted and prosecuted vigorously. Also, I've proposed creating an Office of Procedural Integrity, because not all breaches of trust are technically crimes, but every breach of trust has to be held to account. And thirdly, we need a culture of accountability that lives not just in the prosecutor's office, but it has to live inside the police departments. Right. One note of hope in that horrific report by the Human Rights Department is that every police officer that testified in that report did so voluntarily. And until we actually create a culture where police can come forward and say honestly and hold themselves accountable, there is something that I have the privilege of talking about every day. There's a difference between policy reform and what I call reckoning and repair. And we have reformed the policy. We reformed the no-knock warrant policy in the mayor's office. We reformed that policy in the legislature. A mirror lock is still dead. The officers that were in the room were the officers that were unsanctioned, undisciplined when they assaulted Jaleel Stallings, allegedly assaulted. There's still ongoing litigation, and we have an opportunity to create a culture, not just of reform, but reckoning and repair.
That's time. Mary Moriarty, what kind of accountability should law enforcement face if they obstruct, fail to disclose, or mislead on a defendant or victim of police violence?
I did commentary on the Chauvin trial for MSNBC, BBC, plenty of stations, and one of the things the national press asked me was, how did MPD get to be this way? My answer, in my experience as a public defender, having seen this video, this behavior over and over and over, is that police are never held accountable by prosecutors. That does not happen. I've seen instances when I was a public defender where the county attorney's office charged 6 cases from a police officer in Corcoran. 6 were dismissed by judges for violating people's constitutional rights by 5 different judges, and 2 of the judges found that he lied under oath. And the county attorney's response to, what are you going to do about that, was, we're not his employer. So we actually need somebody who's going to take action as Hennepin County Attorney. And here are the things that I will do. It's actually prosecutors that see more of the video than police leadership. And what I will be doing is giving that to police leadership so that when we see policy violations, so that they can do something about it, document their file and take action. If they don't action, I'm going to create a do not call list. Okay, so if we see police officers who lie under oath or who are engaging in patterns and practices that are abusive, we will not call them as witnesses. And that is a powerful lever that has never been used here. I would charge police for assaulting. It's not just about killing people, but you look at the Jaleel Stallings, and they did commit a first-degree felony assault on him, and so I would charge.
Okay. Jarvis Jones.
Yes.
What kind of accountability should law enforcement face if they obstruct, fail to disclose, or mislead on a defendant or victim of police violence?
First, I have actual plans here. Short-term plans, long-term plans. I encourage you to look at them. I'm not going to describe the problem, as I started off saying, you already know the problem. So the question before us is not the problem, describing the problem. What are we going to do about it? Part of my plan, and they're here, I encourage you to see I'm not making up as I go, is to create an independent investigation crime unit. This independent investigation crime unit will not only investigate law enforcement. The whole system, the law enforcement does what it does because the prosecutor office allows it to do that. Law enforcement does what it does, and the prosecutor office does what it does because the judiciary, the court system, allows it to do. So let's keep it 100. Some of you may know what that means. Let's keep it real. The system needs to be changed. I have a plan, actual plan in writing, so I don't have to be video. It talks about changing the system, not by me alone, by us working together, and we do have to work with the key stakeholders. I was former president of the Minnesota Minority Lawyers Association, former first African-American president of the State Bar, Hennepin County Bar, and trust me, I didn't get there in a 98% bar that's white based on my good looks. I got there because I'm about change.
All right, we're going to start with you, Simon, on the next one. Again, if the families have any questions, you can just raise your hand. The microphone is right there for people to chime in. We're going to get through some initial questions first, but again, feel free to chime in at any point. For Simon, it's been a difficult 2 years for the county, but especially here in Hennepin County. How will you as county attorney balance enforcing the law the way it was written by the legislature and ensuring the public is protected and the victim heard? I'll repeat that again for everybody so you can just take that in. It has been a difficult 2 years for the county, but especially here in Hennepin County. How will you as county attorney balance enforcing the law the way it was written by the legislature and ensuring the public is protected and the victim heard?
Thank you. One of the fundamental responsibilities that the county attorney has is not just to interpret the law, but to set the parameters and allocate resources to bring justice. And so one of the powers, one of the laws that we steward is where we deploy resources and how we use our discretion. Discretion is absolutely critical. Currently, we have laws on the books to hold corporations and individuals accountable when they steal from individual employees. We have never prosecuted a crime from a corporation or employer that's stolen something. We've never deployed resources for that. We use an extraordinary amount of law enforcement and prosecutorial resources to prosecute drug possession crimes. Those are resources we could deploy for violent crimes. Violent crimes, gun crimes. We are going to hear more about switches and the use of semi-automatic handguns becoming automatic handguns. We could deploy lawyers and prosecutors to help keep us safe, and we could stop prosecuting low-level drug offense and personal possession drug offenses because we know this is the core of a lot of disproportional treatment and prosecution and over-policing of black and brown communities. We have an opportunity, we have a discretion, and we can build a safer community together. Also, we have the discretion and the opportunity to aggressively expand expungement, because when people leave the criminal justice system and they do not have the opportunity to get employment, to get housing, it's not just them, and it's not just community that's not safe. All of us are not safe, and that's part of how I would use my discretion.
It's your time. Mayor Moriarty, it has been a difficult 2 years for the county, but especially here in Hennepin County. How will you, as county attorney, balance enforcing the law the way it was written by the legislature and ensuring the public is protected and the victim heard?
There's a tremendous amount of discretion by the county attorney. They decide who to charge, who not to charge, what to charge, whether to ask for bail. One of the things that I will do is collect data on race and gender and put in place policies that will try to eliminate those racial disparities. We know that there are two systems of justice, or there are two systems here, and we can tell that because when we saw the press conference where the current county attorney announced there would be no charges against Amir Locke, he said he could not charge ethically if he couldn't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Yet we have Jaleel Stallings charged with attempted murder of police, and he was acquitted, fortunately, and then the Hennepin County attorney tried to keep that video from becoming public. And we have still not heard from the county attorney about why they went ahead with the prosecution. You've got to be accountable for your decisions. Stand up when press asks you and say, I stand by that decision or I don't. And we haven't heard a single thing about that trial. So transparency is critical. Finally, victims, I have talked to so many victims as I've been running. I am the victim of a violent crime. What I've heard consistently is that the county attorney's office does not listen to victims. Victims feel it's very transactional. Victims feel that they're not heard. One thing I hear frequently is that victims want options for restorative justice. So I will be very victim-centered in hearing and listening to what victims want and need.
Time. Jarvis Jones.
Yes.
It has been a difficult 2 years for the county, but especially here in Hennepin County. How will you as county attorney balance enforcing the law the way it was written by the legislature and ensuring the public is protected by and the victim heard?
Well, first, the prosecutor office, Hennepin County Prosecutor's office, has to get its house in order. So we can keep talking about everyone else, but we have to get our house in order. So what do I mean? There's an institution many of you know who's been out there called THERA, Institution of Justice. What they do is they go into prosecutors' offices and look at the prosecutor policies, practices, procedures from A to Z. It's a national organization. That's the first thing I'm going to do. They look for bias, disproportionate people of color, implicit racist. And it's very clear that we need to start with the prosecutor's office, things we can control to make sure from A to Z, the prosecutor's office is treating people fairly. I'm not saying the prosecutor office is racist, and there may be a few folks there, but implicit bias is throughout the system. So first we start by cleaning our house. That's the first place. Secondly, part of my agenda is community engagement, building bridges. I need some volunteer bridge builders. First 6 months, I will be out every day in the community, part of the community, listening to the community to determine what we need to do. Because I don't have all the answers, and I promise you, anyone up here telling they can do it just in their office alone, they can't. They have to engage the community. We have to get the other key stakeholders involved.
So, Singh,
Thank you.
it has been a difficult 2 years for the county, but especially here in Hennepin County. How will you as county attorney balance enforcing the law the way it was written by the legislature and ensuring the public is protected and the victim heard?
That question is really important because that's a prosecutor's job. A prosecutor's job is to do justice. That's the one goal that we have. It often gets lost. I think a lot of people don't even know that. It's the reason why I took the job. I wanted to learn the system so I could change it, because I knew it wasn't just. And what does a prosecutor have to think about? They have to think about the victim, they have to think about the defendant, and they have to think about the community. I think we've lost that. We've talked a bit about culture. I want to change the culture. We've talked about data. That's only one piece. You have to hire new people who get it, right?
Yeah.
But this is about justice. This impacts real people, and I have specific things I want to do. I've got 40 seconds, so I'm going to try to squeeze as many of them as I can. First, I want to move prosecutors from the drug unit over to the violent crime unit. Why? We have some of the greatest racial disparities in the system with drugs. And in Hennepin County, that's the #1 type of case they still prosecute. And they're still prosecuting marijuana cases. And when we move them over to the violent crime unit, what does that do? Those are the cases where there are victims and family victims. We deserve to spend our resources there. Second, we've talked about police accountability. I've already started talking with prosecutors that I know will do that and believe that. You need to build up that unit, move the resources there to hold the police accountable. It's going to be hard. It's my time. I'll hopefully get a chance at the next question.
There'll be plenty of time.
Yeah.
Just got like an hour left. Okay, Mary Moriarty, this is a new question. We are going to move on to a new question. Do you think the information that is used to create jury pools should be expanded to ensure a more racially diverse pool? I'll say that one more time. Do you think the information that is used to create jury pools should be expanded to ensure a more racially diverse pool?
Absolutely, and that is something that when I was Chief Public Defender, which I was for 6 years in Hennepin County, we were trying to address. The population statistics are very different in terms of the population of Black people in Hennepin County and the population of Black people that actually get called in to be on a panel. And that's because people are drawn in from driver's license, voter registration, and IDs. So other states have expanded that to be if you get any kind of assistance from the government, if you have a library card. I mean, you just need to be a little creative to think of all the ways we could reach people to make sure that when we bring in a panel, it is diverse. I once had, because I tried many cases in Hennepin County. I've spent my entire 31 career in Hennepin County trying cases, working with leadership in Hennepin County. I once tried a case where I had a Black client who watched the all-white jury walk in, and he looked at me and he said, "Is the offer still available?" And pled. So here's the thing. When I was Chief Public Defender, we did some work trying to convince the office, jury office, to expand who comes in, and they were not willing to do that. They were not willing to do that as long as how you bring people in is random. They were satisfied with that, even though so many of our clients see pretty much all white juries. So yes, I would definitely change that.
Thank you. Travis Jones, do you think the information that is used to create jury pools should be expanded to ensure a more racially diverse pool?
I don't think that's the issue at all.
That's the question, though.
No, I'm answering the question.
Okay,
I'm saying,
I'm gonna hold you to it. Just making sure you can stay on the question.
no, yes, sir. It's not, the issue isn't expanding jury pools. Prosecutors routinely strike people of color. That's the issue. My policy will be, just so you know, and it's here in writing, If I'm elected Hennepin County Attorney, I will enact a policy that limits the ability of prosecutors to strike Hennepin County residents of color without cause for jury unless the prosecutor can provide internally a credible explanation for such a strike that does not include race, gender, or other bias as an explanation. We can keep talking about all the jury, the Supreme Court here, Minnesota Supreme Court here, found. This is 25, 30 years ago, unfortunately, folks, things ain't changed that much, that people of color are routinely struck by the prosecutor's office. So there's plenty of people of color. Somehow there's plenty of us they can arrest, but they can't find us to be put on a jury. Come on, let's get real. I'm sorry. That was a little too real.
All right, we'll move on. So, Spotty Singh?
Yeah.
You think the information that is used to create jury pools should be expanded to ensure a more racially diverse pool?
Yes, and I think it's the job of the next Hennepin County Attorney to advocate for that, because it's important for our jury pools and the Hennepin County Attorney Office to be representative of the community. And so we need to expand where we're pulling from, but also we need to stop taking away people's civil rights when they're convicted of a crime. Right now, when someone is convicted of a felony level offense, you lose your right to vote. That's unacceptable. And that alone, changing that policy alone, will expand the jury pool, and rightfully so. We need to think big. We need to fix the system that we have and expand it. We need to use all the tools, because the thing is, this is going to be a tough fight. There are many people that don't agree with this. So you have to go at it from all angles. And I heard the point, I want to mention that a lot of the victims in my cases are people of color. People are shocked. Every single murder case I've had, and I'm only talking about my close cases, they've been all victims of color. I want a pool that is reflective, because we prosecutors know when a victim is a person of color, you're less likely to convict the perpetrator, because you feel less connected to them and dehumanize them. And it's my job as a prosecutor to humanize the victim. My time is almost up, but thank you for the question.
No problem. Simon Troutman, do you think the information that is used to create jury pools should be expanded to ensure a more racially diverse pool?
Yes, absolutely. Great answers from all the candidates here. When it comes to voting rights, that's not a theoretical cause for me. One of the things I'm proudest about in my firm is that we recently actually expanded voting rights for all Minnesotans, particularly those that are on probation, so they don't have their full voting rights restored, but they're able to participate in the party for the first time. We have folks at the convention this Saturday that are going to be participating for the first time, and they should participate in juries for the first time. When I was a teenager, a Puerto Rican young man in South Minneapolis, I actually did research in our community in South Minneapolis to see what the experience was with law enforcement. And we went to Lake Street, we went to Lake and Park, and there were there was a Somali and a black grocery store. And then we went to Lunds Byerly's in Uptown. 100% of the black and Somali adults had experiences of police abuse of power, 100%. Now the other thing that's important is that in Lunds Byerly's, not only was it 0% that had ever personally experienced police abuse of power, but 0% knew anybody who had ever experienced police abuse of power. And it's that lived experience that is so critical at every level of government. It's why I do government work. We need that in the juries. We need that in the prosecutor's office. We need that in every other office, because there are two parts of the county attorney's office. There's a civil office that's roughly 40% of the office. In health and human services and child protective services, we need those lived experiences, and we need that cultural competence.
Thanks, sir. Kidale, you had a question?
Yeah.
Do you want to step to the mic here? Kidale Smith, just let the people know who you are, and once you say your question, we'll start at Jarvis, I believe, and then we will go down the line. Okay?
All right. So my question is actually a little different than what I planned.
We'll say to the people who you are, so we know.
Hi, my name is Kidale Smith. I'm the brother of Winston Smith, who was killed in Uptown, and that's actually what my question will be about. So I hear you guys mentioning names that were on camera, like Jaleel Stallings and Amir Locke, et cetera, et cetera. My question to you is, what are you going to do about tough situations that are not on camera and you don't have the luxury of a video being publicized? Namely, what are you going to do about Winston Smith?
What was the last word you said?
I said, namely, what are you going to do about Winston Smith? That's my question. Would you like me to repeat it?
Repeat it one more time. Repeat it one more time. Yeah, just so
Okay,
everybody can see.
so I'll try to make it more clear. Winston Smith was not on camera. So that seems to be a situation no one wants to take hold on. No one wants to look deeper into that. And so my question to you is, in a situation like this, where the evidence isn't just given to you and you have to fight for it, what do you plan on doing about that? And namely, what will you do for Winston Smith?
I think it's directed to me.
So Jarvis, in a situation where there's no body cam footage, little to no quote-unquote evidence
I got it.
that they're willing to supply.
Yes, sir. I got it. First, I'm sorry for your loss, young man. I cannot, and I'm not going to promise you what I can do in one particular case without knowing the facts. But I do have a question for you. Were the police officers wearing cameras?
They said no, they weren't.
Okay. So that's, for me, is a huge problem. I don't think police officers should get the vote on that. That right away, for me, raises a red flag about credibility. And I'm not going to, without knowing the facts, question these police officers whether they did something right or wrong. But it raises serious questions. And I do believe it has to be seriously investigated. And to me, I'm going to just put it, it makes the situation suspect. And I think there should be disciplinary action at minimum around when officers do not wear the cameras. And so my plan is to look at revisit a lot of these cases, because I think the prosecutor, law enforcement, and the court, who I have tremendous respect for, has been sleeping at the wheel for quite some time on these issues that affect diverse communities, particularly young black men.
It's time. Cadell, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's also important to note that the officers that killed Winston Smith were U.S. Marshals deputized
That's right.
by Ramona Delman, who was appointed by Donald Trump, correct?
That's right.
Okay. So, Sir Spotty Singh,
Thank you.
Oh, so do I get extra 30 seconds or? No.
we can come back to you.
I'm just kidding.
First, I want to say hello. I was there, and I think you recognize me too. I was watching during that press conference, and I'm so sorry for your loss. I talk with murder family victims, and regardless, whenever someone's shot and killed, it's painful, and every murder family victim reacts, I've noticed, the same way. It's so painful, and I'm so sorry for your loss. I can't tell you the specific thing I would do in your brother's case, and it's not because I don't want to, it's because I have some ethical boundaries, and I also know certain things about that case, but I know that sometimes people put so much weight on videos, but prosecutors in many cases don't have videos. And we're able to successfully charge and prosecute and find perpetrators that committed a crime accountable. So just because there wasn't video doesn't mean that, oh, you can't charge it. That's not the case. So if anyone's ever told you that, that's wrong. Second, it's a huge issue that the people were not wearing, the officers were not wearing body cam. They should be on, and I expect that, and there will be consequences. And it's my time, but I want to answer more.
Simon.
Thank you, and also I want to say I'm sorry for your loss, but I've been with enough families with enough violence. You don't want stories from government officials. You want action from government officials. And so when I talk about reckoning as opposed to policy reform and repair, there was already a policy, as already has been stated, to wear body cams for county sheriffs. But without a cultural repair and a cultural reckoning, there's always a workaround. And so the workaround is we're going to deputize you to be federal officers. And so federal officers are now going to be exempted. And now, once that came to light, we have a policy to create accountability and body cameras for federal officers. But the problem isn't with the policy. The problem is reckoning at a deeper level with the culture that wants secrecy, that wants to do things without light being shined. So part of the reason is you can count on my strong will, you can count on my commitment, but more than that, you can hold me accountable for the systems we will build for an office of procedural integrity that builds trust, because I will build all the trust I can, but it's ultimately not about me. It's about the systems that we lead. And so you can count on me and hold me accountable for the systems we're going to create that will reckon with the cultural problems. And we will have a reckoning, we will repair those systems, and we're going to build trust. So to the extent, I thank you for giving me that question. That's my time. Thank you.
Mary.
Appreciate it.
I am sorry for your loss. That case never should have been sent to the Crow Wing County Attorney. Crow Wing, by the way, is up in Brainerd.
That's right.
And I promise you, I will not send cases to other county attorneys to make decisions. Nobody in Hennepin County elected anybody from another county. So I can promise you that. The other thing, so this was a marshal's task force, and I would have certainly recommended to the sheriff and MPD that they not participate in a federal task force if they were not allowed to wear body cam. So that was completely inappropriate in terms of a policy. We still haven't heard from Mona Doman, actually, who's no longer the marshal, but we never heard from her about what was going on, because there was a memo from the Department of Justice about body cams months before that, and we never heard why they weren't wearing body cams. The other big thing that I saw there was not de-escalation. The marshals are famous for using a policy where they box in people. And if you look, everybody saw a video from above and you could see your brother's car boxed in. To me, that puts people in a fight or flight situation. It does not allow for de-escalation. They did not give him a chance. And they knew he was at the restaurant and they followed him up there. We have to implement policies that force police to de-escalate the situation, not come running up on them with their shields and screaming at them and put somebody in a position where they think they have to defend their lives. So those are policies I would actively change.
Thank you for the answers.
Man, personally, I don't want to take up too much time. I thank all y'all for that information, for real. Like, that really hit home.
Before, can I get just
Take it 30 seconds.
2 more seconds?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because, yeah, man, I grew up in the city of Chicago, and I know what it means on a first-hand basis. I grew up in the Inglewood neighborhood. It's called murder capital of Chicago. So I know what it means to lose close ones. It ain't an intellectual thought for me, conceptual for me. I got many, many friends. My closest childhood friend, I'm not gonna go on that. Keep talking about the police. We gotta get to the basis of the issue. The basis of the issue is that prosecutors, the court system, have basically absolute immunity.
That's your 30 seconds.
The police officer, I'm sorry, sir?
That's your 30 seconds. All right, we have to move on.
Okay.
All right, we're going to go to a lightning round question. Thank you, Keydale. Seriously, it's not easy. It's also important to point out that Ramsey County Sheriff Bob Fletcher said that he would not allow his officers to engage in any federal task force where body cams were not allowed, which is also very convenient to say that after the blood of somebody's loved one has hit the pavement. This is a lightning round question. This is a yes or no. I know this is tough for you all. All right, but it can't be tougher than how it is for a lot of people in Hennepin County that are in, as a lot of you suggested, a system that is not serving all of the people. I'm going to repeat this question twice. Jarvis, we're going to start with you. Qualified immunity is a major concern for the lack of accountability on police officers involved in deadly force and brutality incidents. Do you support qualified immunity?
Up to a point.
1 second, I'm going to repeat it again. As I said, qualified immunity is a major concern for the lack of accountability on police officers involved in deadly force and brutality incidents. Do you support qualified immunity? Yes or no?
No, it needs to be changed.
Okay. Mr. Spotty Singh?
I would change the standard of qualified immunity.
Yes or no?
Or get rid of it.
It's a yes or no.
No. I think you're gonna have a tough time with lawyers. We need to define terms, but I would say no.
Well, a lot of people are having tough times with the system right now. And it's not a yes or no question, it's a life or death situation. So I'm going to ask you one more time. Simon, do you support qualified immunity, yes or no?
No.
Okay. Mary Moriarty, do you support qualified immunity?
No.
All right. We're going to move on to some questions from the families. Now you have some sheets with you. Don? You go ahead and introduce to the people who you are, and then ask your question, please. And we'll put 90 seconds on the clock, and we will go down the list and start with Mr. Swati.
I'm bouncing on this list a little bit, though, y'all. My name's Donnie Williams. My grandson is Brian Quinones. And Brian Quinones was...
The mic, please. Just a little bit.
Really? I didn't think I needed that. Okay. I got you.
You gotta kiss it.
My grandson is Brian Quinones, and he was killed September 7th, 2019 in the city of Richfield by 3 Richfield police officers, 2 Edina police officers on a traffic stop. And in that time, this happened, and I think it's wrong, and I want to know what you think. Police investigating police is a nonsense approach to accountability. Without any kind of civilian oversight, there's no accountability for the public or those victimized by deadly force incidents. Do you believe that civilians should be part of an investigation or investigative, potentially being involved in an investigation and seeing the case through to the end?
Mr. Swati, we're going to give you 90 seconds. It's also important to like you're saying that citizens be part of the oversight.
Absolutely.
And it's also important to point out that this happened in Cleveland as well. That was, I think it was issue number 9, correct? That actually people that are affected by police brutality be on the oversight committee. So this was passed in Cleveland. So some of what Don is suggesting here. And just repeat it one more time so everybody hears it and everybody in the cameras can take that in, just so we're not getting anything muddled.
Police investigating police is a nonsense approach to accountability. Without any kind of civilian oversight, there is no accountability for the public or for those victimized by deadly force incidents. Do you believe that an independent investigative body, not affiliated with law enforcement, should be investigated? Is that better?
Sure, Singh, go ahead. You got 90 seconds.
I'll give you an answer you like. Yes. Because the thing is, we've had policing police, and the blue line is real. I can tell you from the inside, it's real. And people will tell you privately what they think, but when they show up on the stand or when they talk to the investigators, they change their answers. The only way we're going to change things if we all partner up together. And that means the community putting the spotlight on this. That means joining up with prosecutors and public defenders and judges to say, we need justice. That we believe in the rule of law, which means every single person, including especially police, are accountable under the law. And the only way you're actually going to affect that change to break our current cycle of protecting the enforcers who abuse their power, not all of them, but we have so many instances, such as it sounds like in the case of your son, and I'm so sorry for your loss, and thank you for being here and advocating for him. You have to have the civilians involved. This is why you need to vote. And you need to keep showing up, because other people will forget. And it also keeps the power on the prosecutors. I keep running out of time. I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Simon.
Thank you. It's always an honor to share any space with you, Donnie. And the simple answer is yes. And the reason why it's a yes is because the gap between trust between community and police is so large and so profound, particularly communities of color. And until we break down that wall, we can't have trust, we can't have certainty. And one of the things that community needs is certainty that their voices were represented, that there's integrity in the process. And we need a civilian presence in our law enforcement, so that law enforcement has a real profound sense that that community is also is holding them accountable, but also for them in certain circumstances. And there has to be buy-in on both sides of that equation. And this is just one of the many tools. And I also just want to say that just because we have civilians there doesn't mean our job is done. We've had a civilian review authority in Minneapolis for a lot of years, and it hasn't solved the problem. I know it's different, but it's the principle that we have to have a culture that reckons with what's broken, and we need to do that deep repair. It's a great policy idea, but we need more than good policy ideas because we need people to be vulnerable. I have 18 seconds. I hope in the next question I'll be able to touch on another point of that, but thank you for the question.
All right, Mary.
I'm sorry for your loss. There needs to be much more transparency. I think that's missing with law enforcement and prosecution. I think that families need to be able to see the video pretty quickly instead of getting interpretations of it from others. I do believe that there should be civilians involved in police oversight and investigation. One of the things that we need to do is to change the culture where county attorneys feel as though there's this kind of buddy-buddy relationship with police. That has to change. And one of the things I will do is, in the office, have separate lawyers who aren't necessarily working with police officers every day to look at these types of cases. It needs to be a professional relationship, and police need to be treated just like everybody else. And I wanted to say also about your son's case, I think it's really important that we separate police. There are many, especially right now, people are struggling with mental health crisis, and police do not deal with that well. And to the extent that we can create systems that prevent police from responding to those types of situations, we are going to be much better off.
Thank you, Mary. Travis.
Sir, you said it was your son?
It's my grandson.
Your grandson? Well, grandsons are like sons to grandpa, and close enough. And as a father, sir, I'm sorry for your loss and the family's loss. First, civilian review, basically what in Chicago, it would be a civilian review board. They have that, so yes, that's important. But we need much more than that, sir. Civilian review boards are usually toothless tigers. In addition, what we need, what I'm putting in place, is an independent investigation crime unit. I know we like 15-second soundbite, but I want to tell you what this independent investigation crime unit will do. Its mandate will be, and I will have the ability to do that. Its mandate will be to investigate government personnel that are directly involved in the criminal justice system that act under the color of law. That is, folks who act in the criminal system. Persons falling under the purview of this unit will include prosecutors, public defenders, law enforcement too, the judiciary, correction system personnel, parole, probate officers, and other individuals acting under the color of law. We're talking about, I have 9 seconds. No one should be above the law. But if you got qualified immunity or absolute immunity, we treat them above the law. But we can hold them ethically responsible where they can be disbarred or so.
Thank you, Travis. Okay.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you for the answers.
Thank you, Don. Others from the families that haven't gone up already, Katie. Please introduce yourself, Katie, and then state your question.
Hi, everybody. My name is Katie Wright. I'm Dante Wright's mom. And you guys have kind of answered a lot of my questions from other families and from the questions. But I would just like to know, so should law enforcement be treated the same as the rest of the community when being investigated and potentially charged?
All right. Simon?
Thank you. Could you say the question one more time?
Should law enforcement be treated the same as the rest of the community when being investigated and potentially charged?
If I understand your question, yes, they should be treated the same, that they should be held accountable under the law, but there's a difference because there's a conflict of interest that's inherent in our office. And so we have to take extraordinary care to make sure that that level of comfort and familiarity and the fact that our office relies on law enforcement officers means we need, in what I call an office of procedural integrity, a dedicated group of lawyers that without fear or favor are able to investigate and hold officers accountable. And you should be able to count on that. And I'm so sorry for your loss, and And every time I see you in community, I know that's not where you want to be. And so I'm grateful for you here today and for you bringing your son's life and truth to hold all of us accountable. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Simon. Mary?
And I'm sorry for your loss, especially that you had to be there at the scene and be treated so badly by law enforcement. I think what you're asking is, so under the police contract, there are all kinds of exceptions for police. For instance, a client that I might have had as a public defender who was charged with a crime doesn't get a cooling off period before they're questioned by the police, right? They get questioned right then and there. There are all kinds of things in the police contract that allow them to be treated differently than anybody else who's charged with a crime. And that has to do with the police contract. And so those things need to be negotiated, and I think we need to put pressure on city council members to negotiate contracts that don't provide police with extra protections than the rest of us. I also think there should be changes in the law, because what I see over and over, and this is Winston Smith, this is so many people, that police put themselves, so the law says you have to be objectively reasonable when you're using deadly force, but the law allows police officers to escalate situations, to put themselves in situations where then they can claim self-defense. And the law doesn't consider the fact that had the cop not escalated this, it never would have happened. So we need a change of law there, and that is something that I would advocate for.
Thank you, Mary. Travis?
Ma'am, I think you asked a very simple question, and the answer is yes, officers shouldn't be given special treatment. We can talk about all the reasons we have two systems of justice, but you asked a simple question. You don't need an explanation why law officers aren't treated the same as us. So yes, they should not get special treatment, and we need to work to change that now. It's just that simple. Everything else is a lot of talk. Why officers and prosecutors in the court, why we have two systems of justice, ma'am. I'm sorry for your loss. But it's not just your loss, it's our loss. It's the community loss. So we're sorry too that we lost someone very special who had something to contribute. So the answer is no. Simple, it ain't hard. The issue is, are we willing to fight for it? But we get caught up in all these long explanations. Why? Yes, there are reasons why. So I'm not saying to just go away. Nothing about me is simplistic. But I'm willing to do what it takes to make it right, and that's what we need. Not talking about all the reasons why. Excuse me, I feel your pain.
Thank you, Travis. Shashwat?
Thank you, and thanks for being here and advocating for your son. I was there that day for the verdict too, and I was, not the verdict, the sentencing, and I was shocked. And the way the judge talked about it, and I know her, I'm so sorry, because you don't want to hear sorry, but it seemed like in murder hearings, you normally, you hear about the victim and their life, and they don't get to live anymore. And your son had a child, right? And the officer and all the letters she got, they kept emphasizing those things. And there wasn't that balance. And I'm really, I felt like that sentencing could have been handled differently. I think officers often get this presumption of like protection, right, in our system. And so I think they should be treated just like anyone else, because I believe in rule of law. Right? They're given extra training specifically so that they can handle these types of situations. Not everyone makes it through training for a reason. And we have to hold them accountable and start chipping away at all these protections. And I say chipping away because I'd like to rip them off, but...
Thank you so much, Katie. Do we have anybody else from the families that has a question? Tashira Garraway, would you like to introduce yourself and then state your question?
Hi, my name is Tashira Garraway.
founder of an organization called Family Supporting Families Against Police Violence. Also, the mother of Justin Tigan, who was beat to death and thrown in the dumpster by the St. Paul Police Department, August 19, 2009. And so, one thing that I heard John say is that when Justin was murdered, or think about when your loved one was murdered and you had a chance to sit in front of the county attorney, what questions would you ask? And I remember when because right now I'm going through this whole thing in the media where they're slandering my son's father's story, but they failed to come to our family and talk to our family and answer our questions of how and why this happened. And they would not show us the video and show us the truth about what happened to my son's father. And when we seen the video, then it was edited, it was cropped out. And then his skull was cracked in half and he had dog bites and everything all over his body. So, and now I have to roll around with security because I'm getting death threats and everything because I'm standing up to these people. But my question to you guys is kind of like a combination of two questions. One, how will you, what measures will you take to hold yourself accountable to the families, to answer the families' questions, to make sure transparency is given to the families, because we are the ones that have to live after, whether it's a high-profile case or whether it's a case that they work strategically and very hard to cover up. How will you, if the police was involved, if it was any kind of encounter where the police originally pulled him over or anything like that, how will you guys work to build that relationship with the family and make sure they get a true, honest answers? Because that's what my family didn't get. And then in addition to that, as me being the founder of Family Supporting Families, I would like to know, as the county attorneys, how will you guys work to build relationships with the families going forward, like as a group? Because we're out here, we are sticking together, fighting together, but we don't have a relationship with Mike Freeman. You know what I mean? John Choi came and met with us like one time. So that's what I want to know. Those are my questions.
All right, we're going to start with Mary Moriarty. Thank you so much to share. Did you want to add anything? Michelle said anything?
No.
Okay. So, all right, we're going to start with Mary Moriarty, and just to kind of boil this down and correct me if I'm wrong, what will you do to be accountable to families affected by police violence, and how will you build a relationship with those families, Mary?
Hi, Tashir. Hi. I've already been building those relationships by showing up in the community, having conversations with you, coming to events that are put on by you, and I'll continue to do that. The position of the county attorney requires transparency, which we don't have. It requires accountability, which we don't have, and accessibility. And that means being in the community and talking to people, even if they're going to be upset with you, because they have a right to be. And so I'm not afraid of that. You know, when I was chief public defender, I used to be in the community, and sometimes people would say to me, "You're a bunch of public pretenders," and stuff like that. I don't take that serious, or I don't take that personally. I mean, and so I will be there listening. You invite me to an event, I will be there. And I think it's critically important to be transparent to the family. They're the person who's lost a loved one, and they're the family that's going to have to live with this answer too. And so yes, being very transparent and making sure the family understands why the decision was made, that the family is able to see any evidence that they want to see, and answer questions. I think that's critically important. And I will continue to be in the community, be accessible, and be accountable, because I think that's absolutely critical.
Thank you, Mary. Jarvis, how will you be accountable, if elected, how will you be accountable to families affected by police violence and build relationships with them?
A significant part of my platform is building bridges in the community. The prosecutor today uses his position or responsibility primarily as prosecution. That is a significant role. It's also prevention and reducing crime. If I'm in the office, and this is in my platform, 5 days a week, I'm not doing my job. I should be out in all the communities, particularly those troubled neighborhoods, out there building relationships. There's a trust that has been lost, understandably. So you won't have to call me to invite me. I will be out there because I feel part of it. I come from from the community. You won't need a translator for me to understand your pain. I've been stopped many times driving while black. I've been treated many times. Don't let this bow tie fool you. When I'm in my car and wearing a bow tie, I'm just like anyone else, being pulled over, stopped, driving while black, treated like a suspect first. And I should tell you, I have nothing against police officers. Where I grew up, the only time we saw police officers was when they were arresting someone or harassing someone. My brother and sister now are first generation Chicago police officers in the inner city. So I know, I see both sides. I think most police officers are trying to do their job, but there's enough of them where the communities is catching hell. But I will be in the community now.
It's time.
You'll be asking me to leave.
Thank you, Jarvis.
Yes, sir.
Just fine. What will you do, if elected, what will you do to build accountability, what will you do to be accountable to families affected by police brutality and build relationships with them?
When I'm Hennepin County Attorney, I'm going to keep doing what I've already been doing. Keep showing up in the community, keep coming to events like this so that you can hold me accountable. I'm not afraid of it. I want it. Because also the prosecutors in my office need to know we're watching. What would I do with victims? I would meet with you. It's amazing, but many prosecutors are awful with talking with victims. I've been in some of the meetings because back when I first started, I would shadow people, condescending, won't make eye contact, won't answer your questions, act as if you're a bother, even though you didn't ask to be a victim or the family of a victim. I want to do so much, and I will. I will train the prosecutors, not just the victim advocates, but the prosecutors on trauma-informed and victim advocate conversations. How to do it right. It's not just about doing it, but doing it right. I would build the relationships that I've already built upon. I've met with state legislators, council members, community members. I've been presidents of lots of organizations. I show up at these press conferences. I don't need to speak because the most important thing for me is to listen. And when I'm Hennepin County Attorney, I'm going to listen.
Thank you, Sister. Simon, if elected Hennepin County District Attorney, what will you do to be accountable to families affected by police brutality and build relationships?
Shira, it's good to see you, and I appreciate your support in this campaign. And for everybody here, you can.
Tornado alert.
Not by windows.
There's no windows, we're good.
We should be fine, Simon.
All right, here we go.
All right, go ahead.
All right, thank you. For everybody here, you know how I'm going to lead because you know how I've led, and it's a privilege to stand with you as I stood with you, and to not stand with you, to just be with you when the cameras are off. I have never, ever, ever shied away from a hard conversation with community, not once. That's where my heart is alive. That's what I've invested my life, my heart, my work into. And so there's no doubt about where I'm going to be. And that also means I have hard conversations. I don't need affirmation from folks that are in grief. I've never looked for that. And so whatever feeling, whatever thought, whatever insight you have, it's my job as a public servant to receive that. And you don't have to wonder when I'm elected how I will receive that. Because the toughest things that anybody's ever said to me are folks in grief because the government's perpetrated violence against their family. And so you can count on me to be accountable. You can also count on me to have tough conversations and be present with law enforcement officers and not just tell them tough things, but also listen from them. And you can count on me to be not just a listening ear, but a bridge to build trust and build deep repair to systems that need trust and need deep repair.
Thank you, Simon. We have Amity Dimmick-Heisler, who is still here. Amity, are you with us?
I am.
All right,
Can you hear
Amity.
me?
We can hear you. We can hear you. So Amity.
Hi, everybody. I am Amity Jenick. I don't live in town, so I am on Zoom. I am the mother of Kobe Jenick Heisler, a young 21-year-old boy who was on the autism spectrum and was murdered in his own home in front of his grandmother on a call that had been reversed because everything was fine. I flipped through a few different questions I was going to ask. A lot of the good questions were already asked. One thing I'm just going to point out is I'm not even going to bring up body-worn cameras. I will just automatically expect that all of you will do whatever it takes to get whatever departments don't have them currently, because believe it or not, there are some departments that don't have them, beyond unacceptable, absolutely unexcusable. So we'll just all agree that we're already on the same page on that. Y'all will do whatever it takes to fix that. My question to you all would be, is if you got elected as Hennepin County District Attorney, would any of you review any of the cases, specifically some of the more recent cases that were under Mike Freeman's direction? Because as a person in the community, it looks to me like a lot of people have lost faith in Mike Freeman's ability to be in charge of cases. We saw him not in charge of the Floyd case, then not in charge of the Wright case, and then not in charge of the Locke case. But yet you have families like myself and Travis Jordan and the Quinones family who were right before that time frame. And one of the articles I read, his own colleagues, his own department said that he was taking off of the Floyd case due to sloppiness. That's too close in proximity to what our families went through. If he was sloppy, if his office was sloppy that day, they were sloppy when they reviewed my case, when they reviewed Travis Jordan's case, when they reviewed Brian Quinones' case. And a good example of this, and I'll sit down with each and any one of you, I mean, the report that they put out in my son's case is full of absolute inaccuracies compared to the evidence that they provide, and some bold-faced lies. And I'd even consider it borderline defamation of character against my son. It's bullcrap. So my question is would any of you do what is right and review the prior cases that Mike Freeman has left uncharged when there's no confidence whatsoever in that determination? Thank you very much. I appreciate you guys coming and being willing to sit with us.
Thank you so much, Amity. We appreciate you, and thank you for asking that question. Jarvis, we'll start with you. Would you, if elected Hennepin County District Attorney, would you review cases that were under Mike Freeman?
I know you're getting tired of hearing this in my plan, but I'm not just making it up. I understand what the issue is. Mike Freeman has a unit to review cases where people have been charged. The issue is it's underfunded. So as I say in my plan, it will be a priority. I'm not just making this stuff as I go, to make sure it's well-staffed, well-funded, and the person who's in charge of that will report directly to me, because this is the reality. Our job isn't just to prosecute. It's a travesty, in my view, of justice to have an innocent person. If you find someone who's innocent, and we know there's a lot of innocent folks who get charged from sloppiness and many other reasons. So ma'am, the answer to your question is absolutely. I'm going to look at the resources there, and I'm going to take a hard look at expanding that unit, because no one should be in jail if they are really not either under the law guilty, or it's not just if they're innocent, if they did not get a fair trial. Because if someone does not get a fair trial, you cannot know if they're innocent or not. And one of the things I will be looking at is where the prosecutor office has held exculpatory evidence, which is not uncommon.
Thank you, Jarvis.
Thank you.
So Swati, if elected as Hennepin County DA, will you be reviewing cases that were under Mike Freeman?
A prosecutor's job is to do justice. So if there's evidence that's there and the case should have been charged, yes.
From your understanding right now, Mike Freeman, do you believe there's evidence right now?
I'm not there and I don't have access to all the evidence, But when I'm Hennepin County Attorney, I plan on reviewing what's been done. I'm really concerned what's been happening for decades. And not only am I planning on reviewing cases when there's possible evidence that a crime was committed and was not charged, even though there was a valid legal basis to proceed, I want to look at cases where there's been convictions, and maybe it was a wrongful conviction. Because a prosecutor's job is to do justice. And I'm so glad that she mentioned trust. Why do we need to do this? I don't have much faith in the system, and I'm a prosecutor. I purposely I went to the University of Minnesota Law School, got a criminal law concentration. I got experience at the U.S. Attorney's Office in civil rights cases. I worked for 2 federal judges, a Hennepin County District Court judge. I saw cases where officers abused their power, where they lied. And even if cases are not charged but you see abuse, it's the responsibility of the Hennepin County Attorney to do something about it. There's so much we can do, and we haven't been doing it.
Time. Thank you, Mr. Spani. Simon, if elected Hennepin County DA, will you review cases that were under the predecessor, Mike Freeman?
Andy, it's good. I'd say it's good to see you. It's good to hear from you. And it's an honor to work with you in the work of Minnesota Justice Coalition. And just like the work that we've done here has shown a light on the gaps in policy, the Office of Procedural Integrity, an office that's dedicated to this kind of accountability, is something that you can count on even more than one county attorney's strong will. Our will is critical, but the systems that we establish that reckon with the cultural challenges that we have are absolutely essential. We need to partner not just within our own house, but rely on resources like the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, and not be afraid to build partnerships outside of our culture to transform our culture. And so when that comes to individual cases, absolutely, there are individual cases we will need to review, and we'll have the systems in place to be able to review that. We will be able to fund those systems. And also, you can count on me to build the partnerships that not just build the systems, but build trust in community, so that when you get an outcome, it's an outcome that you can have faith in, you can have confidence in, and you can heal from.
Thank you, Simon. Mary, if elected Hennepin County DA, will you be reviewing cases that were under Mike Freeman?
Yes, and I'd include the Terrence Franklin case, which we're waiting to hear
Which
about.
was his anniversary just yesterday, actually.
What?
I believe it was his anniversary yesterday.
Oh, thank you. And hi, Amity, thanks for calling in with a question. I tried cases in Hennepin County for over 20 years, and I saw a lot of behavior from prosecutors that was pretty shocking. For instance, I saw prosecutors talk about their victims, their witnesses, in ways that were outrageous. They would say to juries, which were mostly white, you might wonder why the victim, the witness behaved a certain way. It's because they're from a different world than you and I are from. And I would object, and the court would say it was okay. And that went on for years. So I know this. I've been in the system of Hennepin County for over 31 years. I know how it works like the back of my hand. I understand what the issues are. And because I tried cases, I'm well aware of many cases where I think there probably was a wrongful conviction. And we do need to be proactive in looking at those cases, because I would say after Police Officer Jerry Hoff was killed, all bets were off, and police engaged in a lot of behavior that was inappropriate, including in the case of my Aunt Borrell, who I've hired and is working on my campaign.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, we are going to call Michelle Gross to ask a question. I'd like to introduce yourself and then state your question, Michelle. That'd be great.
Thank you, and thanks to the families for allowing me to ask this question. My name is Michelle Gross, and I'm the president of Communities United Against Police Brutality. And I want to just make a quick statement and also tie it to a question. Our organization has reinvestigated the wrongful deaths of a number of people who have been killed by police throughout the state. And in our reinvestigations, we typically find that, especially in those cases in Hennepin County, and as well as Ramsey County, that there's been a very poor quality investigation done by the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. I have a bill at the legislature that would create an independent prosecutory body with an investigation unit attached to it, outside of any law enforcement. And so part of my question is, would you support that? And then I do have a follow-up question to that.
Can you repeat that last part, Michelle, just so we're crystal clear on what you're asking?
I'm asking, would you support the creation of an independent prosecutory office for police critical incidents so that we can get this whole thing away from the Bureau of, what people in the movement call Bureau of Cop Apologists, frankly?
All right, so Swati, we're going to start with you.
I'm open to it. It's important to me how it's structured and who they hire, because I don't want it to become another BCA.
Simon?
Yes.
Like to add anything?
Well, I'd add that I'm very appreciative of your work, Michelle, and it's an often thankless service, and it shouldn't be incumbent on you. It's the government's responsibility. And so I think it's absolutely essential, as part of what I'm advocating for, that we recognize the conflicts of interests that are absolutely inherent. They're inherent in our office, they're inherent in the BCA, and creating an independent government organization that holds law enforcement accountable is an excellent idea.
Mary?
Yes. Because I tried cases for so long, I saw so many investigations done by all kinds of different organizations, and I remember so often wondering why prosecutors didn't want better investigations, because they spent all this time justifying stuff, bad investigation, misbehavior, instead of handling it. Because as a prosecutor, especially on a serious crime, you actually want to be able to prove your case. And as a defense lawyer, I would look at these cases and I would know what I could cross-examine the cop or the witness about, and I would wonder, how are they going to try to explain this? And the truth was, they never did. And so I got to cross-examine the cop about it, and clients got acquitted. So as Hennepin County Attorney, I want good investigations. That's how you make a case. And so I'm not going to be apologizing for bad police behavior, and that is why it's so critically important that the county attorney be part of the process of holding people accountable. And making sure that police officers who don't investigate well or involved in some kind of misbehavior are held accountable.
Thank you, Mary. Jarvis?
First, I would have to see your bill. Just keeping it real. I like the spirit of it. This is where I'm at on your question. I like the spirit of what you're saying. If I'm not elected Hennepin County Attorney, I will support your bill, because I don't have the confidence and trust in the system that it will do what's necessary to make the changes you're talking about. Folks have been doing this for 20, 30 years, and they haven't made the change. And we hear this over and over. So, yes, I would support. But if I'm elected Hennepin County Attorney, I'm going to work with you. And when I put in place this investigation unit that investigates police officers, including prosecutors, for violation, it will be a separate walled-off unit of senior attorneys. If you still think there's a need for it, you will see that I do what I say, I always have, and then we can talk further. So that's maybe not the answer you want, but if I'm not elected, absolutely, because I don't have the confidence either. I hear too much talking why things are. You already know why things are. Everyone here knows why things are. I'm about making changes. I'm sick and tired of talking about what people telling us why things are. We live it. You don't need us to tell you why they are. You want to know what we're going to do about it. That's my response.
Thank you, Michelle.
I have a follow-up with that.
Oh, okay.
And this is changing things up a little bit. How will you balance the impacts of crime on the community with the impacts of criminalization of people of color, poor people, and people experiencing mental illness?
Repeat that one more time, and we're going to put 30 seconds on the clock because we're running out of time here.
How will you balance the impacts of crime on the community with the impacts of criminalization of people of color, poor people, and people experiencing mental illness? And if it's okay, I'm going to sit down because I'm reaching my limit for standing up.
Sorry.
Well, first we have to acknowledge that social justice without economic justice is not at all justice. And so things like fines that criminalize poverty, that fall disproportionately on people of color and poor folks, we should never make revenue off of holding people accountable. Additionally, expanding diversion programs that are currently non-existent, victims-based and centered restorative justice practices are absolutely essential, and a prison to labor pipeline so that people, once they've been held accountable, can re-enter community and do so with prosperity and dignity.
Thank you, Mary.
I was chair of the Behavioral Health Committee in Hennepin County for 6 years, and we studied options for people with mental health. And I'm convinced what they rolled out in Minneapolis in November, the therapists who are in a mobile van, is really the way to go, because they can handle those calls that usually come to police. And it's different than co-responder, because a co-responder also has a police officer that clears the scene. What we want to do is separate that and make sure we have mental health professionals responding and building relationships with people in the community.
Thank you for your time. Jarvis.
A number of progressive prosecutors around the country have put a number of things in place. I'm going to address that. There was a number of questions requested about the unfair prosecution or disproportionate prosecution of people of color. I would say it's exponential disproportionate prosecution of people of color. So in those situations, marijuana, driving while black, when the officer brings those cases, we're going to look at them very closely. Very closely.
Thank you, Jarvis. Just fine.
Thank you. What are the issues that we see most in the criminal justice system? It's addiction, it's mental health, and crimes and poverty. Something that I would like to really expand when I'm Hennepin County Attorney is pre-charge diversion. Why? Because when someone is charged with a crime, that's on your record, and it can follow you, even if you're acquitted, right? But with diversion, we assess a person, and we assess their needs. So it might be addiction, it might be mental health, and a report is done identifying specific things that they need, and that they need to do it. And if they,
Okay, we're going to go into the lightning round question. This is a yes or no question. We're going to start with you, Mary. Do you think President Joe Biden should pack the court if Roe v. Wade is overturned? I'll repeat that. Do you think President Joe Biden should pack the court if Roe v. Wade is overturned?
Yes.
Jarvis.
Yes.
Swati.
I'm okay with that. And when I'm a prosecutor, I'm not going to prosecute any abortion cases.
Simon.
Yes.
Another lightning round question. The Human Rights Report recently released validated many of the grievances cried out by the protest over the past 2 years. Do you believe that the peaceful protesters who were arrested and charged with the crimes such as the 646 should have their charges and or their convictions dismissed? Jarvis.
I would look at it. I'm never going to sit here and tell you I'm just going to dismiss the case before looking at it.
Yes,
If I looked at it and there wasn't a strong basis for it, my inclination would be to dismiss it.
Okay,
But as a prosecutor, we look at facts.
So yes or no question, Jarvis? Swati.
Could you repeat the question?
Oh, I'm sorry, you said it's a yes or no?
Yeah. Do you believe, okay, well, I'll say that again for you, Jarvis. Do you believe that the peaceful protesters who were arrested and charged with the crimes such as the 646 should have their charges and or their convictions dismissed?
I'm sorry, I gave you my yes or no answer. That's my answer, what I gave you.
Sir Swati.
I have to pick the same one. I have to look at the evidence in every case, but
Simon.
Same answer in diversion.
Mary?
Yes.
Okay. We're going to start with Sir Swati on this lightning round question. It's a yes or no question. Do you support equal pay for public defenders and prosecutors?
yes.
Simon.
Oh, yes.
Mary.
Oh, I got fired for supporting it, so yeah.
Jarvis.
Absolutely no. Yes, I do. I do. That's an easy one.
Okay. We're going to get to 2 more questions. Then we have independent questions and then closing. So we're going to start with Simon. Days after George Floyd was murdered by the MPD, a black man named Calvin Horton Jr. was shot and killed by a white pawn shop owner on Lake Street. DA Mike Freeman decided he could not charge the store owner with anything and let him walk in less than 72 hours. How would you have handled this case? That's 90 seconds, please. Sorry about that.
I think the only way you can compare and contrast that is how the office handled the murder of George Perry Floyd. And the comments were quick and they were non-committal, and he had options of arresting the officer sooner and refused to do so. How you could handle that circumstance differently is, it looks like we have...
it's okay, I got time here.
Okay. The investigation was quick. I don't have the evidence in front of me, so it's hard to say how I would have responded differently without seeing the evidence. But you can look at the pattern of how those cases are handled, and people need to be held equally accountable. And the unrest rests in no small part because community lost the confidence in equal treatment under the law.
Mary Moriarty. Days after George Floyd was murdered by the APD, a black man by the name of Calvin Horton Jr. was shot and killed by a white pawn shop owner on Lake Street. DA Mike Freeman decided that he could not charge the store owner with anything and let him walk. How would you have handled this differently, if at all?
When I was chief public defender, and certainly when I was a public defender, I saw 2 systems where our clients were charged and arrested right away and held until they decided whether charges should come out. And I've noticed with police officers, they're not charged immediately, usually. They're out of custody, and this county attorney's office takes, in some cases, months to make a determination. So we need to have consistency in the county attorney's office and how they handle cases, whether it's a civilian who is killed or a police officer. We need transparency, we need accountability, we need explanations. I did follow that case, and I wondered, at least in the descriptions that I saw in the paper, why there wasn't enough evidence to charge, but I obviously haven't seen the evidence either. But we really didn't get a good explanation, a transparent explanation from the county attorney's office as to why it couldn't be charged, other than they couldn't disprove self-defense. So I would have handled that. Overall, the culture needs to change, and the Hennepin County Attorney needs to develop consistent practices. I will say also very quickly, in the Floyd case, when the County Attorney's Office did file a complaint, every defense lawyer I knew said, boy, I wish they'd charge our complaints that way, with every last defense actually written in the complaint.
Thank you, Mary. Jarvis. Days after George Floyd was murdered by the MPD, a black man named Calvin Horton Jr. was shot and killed by a white pawn shop owner on Lake Street, whose name is Margaret. Hennepin County DA Mike Freeman decided he cannot charge the store owner with anything and let him walk. How would you have handled this differently, if at all?
When I would handle it, and I know what folks want to hear, but I'm going to keep it 100. The fact is, without seeing all the facts in the case, no prosecutor keeping it 100 can tell you what they're going to do in a case. And so I would look at it carefully, scrutinize, make sure the officer has abided by the law. If they did, then I'm not going to charge them. But I don't believe police officers are above the law. You already heard, I don't think prosecutors are.
It wasn't an officer, it was the owner of the pawn shop.
Okay, thank you, sir. That's why I said, I don't know all the facts in that case, and I appreciate the correction. So that's why we look at all the facts. So I'm not gonna sit here and tell you what I'm gonna do in the case. And if any prosecutor up here is telling you what they're gonna do in the case, I'm sorry, that ain't reality. You need folks who are gonna talk straight to you. What I'm telling you I'm gonna do is, I understand how people of color and other people, poor people too, are treated unfairly. I'm going to make sure folks, regardless of what you have in your wallet, is treated fairly, with dignity and respect. And I wish I could just tell you a case I have no facts in front of me, what I'm going to do. But that ain't keeping it real, and that ain't reality, and I'm not going to blow smoke. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Travis. Time. Mr. Swati. Days after George Floyd was murdered by the MPD, a black man named Calvin Horton Jr. was shot and killed by a white pawn shop owner on Lake Street. Hennepin County DA Mike Freeman decided he would not charge the store owner with anything and let him walk. How would you handle this differently, if at all?
I would be open about it. And if I decided that there wasn't a basis to charge, I would be clear why, and I'd be very quick about it. But the thing is, I know these answers are frustrating. It's a case-by-case basis, so you might wonder, how can you judge us? We keep saying it depends on the case. Look at our values. Look who comes with the open mind. Look who's open to charging officers, or people that are white, or people that have power. And I don't have the evidence in that case, but I can tell you my values. And I can tell you, like, for example, with the Kim Potter trial, there was a huge split among prosecutors. There are many defense attorneys even, I was shocked to read the newspaper, that felt, very strongly, I don't know, about that charging the additional count. Let me tell you, we have a long history of case law. There are certain types of cases prosecutors have not charged because they're considered hard. And we sometimes preemptively decide not to charge because we think, we're going to lose that trial. Let me tell you, I'm fine charging a case if there's a legal basis to charge it. The standard is probable cause. If there's a chance that we might get an acquittal at trial and I don't like it, it's still worth it to charge it and take it to trial when it's the right thing to do.
Time.
Thank you.
Some details I want to point out about that question are pawn shop, should go closely tied with the MPD, white, black, and then also Mike Freeman. So just some of the details there and some of the answers missed out. We're going to go to our next question. There have been reports that prosecutors have failed to disclose crucial information, a potential violation of the Brady rules. How will you ensure that this is not being violated, and what will you do for the past cases that suffered these violations? I will repeat this question, and we will start with Mary. There have been reports that prosecutors have failed to disclose crucial information, a potential violation of the Brady rules. How will you ensure that this is not being violated, and what will you do for the past cases that suffered these violations? Mary Moriarty.
They're not just reports. When I was chief public defender, that's something I talked publicly about. When the county attorney's office did not disclose the fact that a sexual assault nurse had been fired that they were using as an expert, they didn't disclose that. They didn't disclose the fact that the state trooper had taken nude photos off of a woman's phone, and he was the same witness in one of our gun cases, and the prosecutor claimed she didn't know that they were going to charge and did charge this trooper. So I know this to be true, and this is something I talked about very publicly. It was in the newspaper. Now, there's a huge problem with the county attorney's Brady policy, and that is this. You're supposed to disclose information that might be favorable to the defense. It is not up to the prosecutor to decide whether it's admissible or they have to disclose it. Their policy, because we asked for it and I've seen it, is that they do not even think about disclosing Brady material unless the person who's accused requests a contested hearing. So trial, or some type of suppression hearing. Then a flag comes up in their system, and then they ask a supervisor if they should disclose it. What that means is hundreds of people plead guilty to cases not having any idea that there's Brady information there. I would change that policy so that Brady information is given immediately to the defense, and I'll go back and look and see whether it should have been disclosed in other cases.
Time. Thank you, Mary. Jarvis. There have been reports that prosecutors have failed to disclose crucial information, a potential violation of the Brady rules. How will you ensure that this is not being violated, and what will you do for the past cases that suffered these violations?
This is my policy on that. It's called an open file policy. Whether the evidence is exculpatory or not, the accused is entitled to full disclosure of all relevant and material evidence. All prosecutors will be required to fully comply with the spirit and law of our legal and ethical obligation to the accused. Those prosecutors, what folks haven't said is, who don't comply with it, they won't be working. in my office. Because we have an obligation to make sure people are treated fairly. And if a prosecutor is putting their hands on the scale, an officer of the court, I don't think he gets to it. So we keep talking about law enforcement when prosecutors withhold evidence, which is not uncommon. One is ethical violence. So they have, just so you know, the two standards of the law. Prosecutors have absolute immunity. So they can do that all they want and they won't be prosecuted based on the court decision. But one, we will report them ethically because they have an ethical obligation. And two, they will not be working for my office. It's just that simple. No one is above the law. So we can do more. We don't have to, anyway, we can do more.
Thank you, Jarvis. Sir Swati?
Yeah. So in the last year or so, there was actually a county attorney, the top county attorney in greater Minnesota, that actually got in trouble. It went up to the appellate courts. And you know why he got in trouble? Because he didn't do his job. He didn't make sure that the prosecutors knew what the Brady policy was, how that evidence was collected, when it should be disclosed, how it should be disclosed. This is really basic. And it was a big deal that the appellate courts held the county attorney responsible. When I'm Hennepin County Attorney, I plan on going back to the basics. We're talking about, oh, we're just assuming that we have good Brady information? Really? I read the Department of Human Rights report. I want to know the background of every single Minneapolis Police Department officer. I want to collect that information. I want to make sure there's a system in place that updates that information. I want to make sure that my prosecutors, who are my responsibility, are trained to know what we're doing, why we're doing it, how to find that information so it's easily accessible, how to disclose it, when to disclose. Basic.
Thank you. Simon, how will you ensure that this is not being, the Brady rules are not being violated, and what will you do for past cases that have suffered these violations?
This is absolutely one of the most critical policy areas that the county attorney will be responsible in the coming year. When we look at what now seems like an obvious conviction in the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, it missed the news in most news cycles that the original prosecutor is now under criminal indictment because he failed to hold that individual accountable. And that individual, one of the individuals was a former police officer. Brady disclosures we can set the policy through the county attorney's office to mandate not just the policies that, excuse me, not just the evidence that the police disclose, but one of the obligations that the county attorney has is to work with the dozens of local law enforcement officers to get the information to disclose. And we had recently evidence that things as abhorrent as sexual misconduct were classified as coaching in Minneapolis Police Department and were not disclosed even to the county attorney's office. And so we have an obligation not just to disclose what we know, but to seek out what we don't know and create not just a policy, but a transformational culture. We need to empower chiefs of police with a Brady list that says if your officer has a habit of not telling the truth, we're not going to call them as a witness, just like we wouldn't call any witness that has a habit of not telling the truth. And that strengthens not just our office, but it strengthens the dozens of other offices, and that's really what this office does. It's an office that leads other offices and leads other leaders.
Thank you, Senator. Courtney, we have you here today. Did you want to speak or ask a question? I just want to make sure all the family members get to say something.
Quickly say, I'd rather give up my time to anyone else. If anyone else has a question,
No. I mean,
come up and ask.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, y'all know me.
Just introduce yourself, Courtney, and then ask your question. We'll give each member 90 seconds.
Hi, everybody.
We'll turn the mic up to your.
Oh, hey. So my name is Courtney Ross. I am the fiance of George Floyd. always will be. I'm also the educator, Dante Wright. And as I was sitting here, I had a question in mind, and I have changed my mind because my passion lies in education, and I spent almost 30 years in public education. I recall there being a program that the U of M provided to bring education of law to students in public schools. So I guess a challenge, or maybe to all of you, or maybe I want to know some of the ideas of how will you bring and how will you use your platform to educate students. So in the future, we have more people that look like our students up here. And so we have students that know exactly what to do when they're being pulled over, that know what to do when they're going to court, because the system has confused me, and I consider myself an educated, intelligent person, and being through in the past 2 years has been a completely new education. So what are your ideas to influence our students in the future?
We'll start with you, Jarvis.
Thank you. One of the things I mentioned, I'm going to require prosecutors to be in the community, but the other area, I won't use that four-letter word, plan. The other area, what I propose is that prosecutors need to be in the school. We have a pro bono obligation to provide services, free services. Well, part of our obligation out here as prosecutors is not to be just morticians coming into the community with bad news prosecuting. We have a duty to also protect and serve the community. So one of the things I'm proposing is a second chance accountability program that I have. It's in the plan, where we go into the schools, work with schools, shareholders, before kids get in trouble. We got to get the kids early on in the pipeline, particularly in some of our diverse community, where, but for the grace of God, great parents and a pastor who grabbed me by the shoulder and kept me on the right path. The prosecutors, particularly...
Lloyd did that for me too.
Yes, ma'am. And particularly...
I was 40 something, but it's cool.
I appreciate, hey, I understand what you said. I got 8 seconds. So prosecutors will be required to be in the community, in the school. You will see it in my plan. I call it second chance accountability before kids get into trouble. Not waiting till they're in trouble.
Thank you, James. Mr. Switzer.
Thank you. I love your question. I've been going, when I was working in Hennepin County for 3 years, I would do the reading program, so going to North Minneapolis, and there were law clerks, prosecutors, public defenders, judges, court staff. We would go, and so many of the kids that I'd read with, they were so smart. And I would ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I remember the smartest kid I ever had. She was a young black girl. She was like, work at Burger King. And I was like, no, you are so smart. You're smarter than most kids I've ever met. I bought her book.
Wrong Burger King. Wrong Burger King. I'm just like,
no, it's okay. It's important to educate the next generation, and it's also important for people in the court system to see the generation and the impact the criminal justice system has had. Because so many of the kids I would read with, they would have a parent in custody. I had a foster kid who for Christmas wanted to know what Christmas was like. And so it's important to educate us, but be out in the community. And I've been mentoring law students, mostly people of color, and I'm continuing to do that. I remain engaged in the diverse law organizations because that's who I plan on hiring, and I plan on keep this change going. I want the pipeline.
Thank you, Mr. Switzer. Simon.
Courtney. We give you a couple of answers. One, when it comes to rebuilding relationships between public safety and community, especially young people, it's incumbent on the prosecutor's office, but also law enforcement. And one of the things that the county can do as we're wondering what to do with community resource officers that are in the schools. We have community resource officers that cycle through those schools every year. There's not one officer that I'm aware of that will ever be present throughout the school life of any of those children. There are officers there that don't want to be there. It's a terrible idea, it's a terrible system, and the county could invest dollars so that folks with master's degrees in social work and child development could be with children and could actually do that work of building healthy relationships. And that's something that the county can fund, has to fund. Also, there are some programs that the county is engaged in right now that need to be scaled up. Two of those programs, one is HEALS 2.0. It's taking dollars and building community relationships and being present in the community, and that needs to be expanded, it needs to be continued, it needs to be deepened. Also, there's the HOPE program in the jails, which is too late, I know, but I'm going to mention it also, that they've begun a pilot program that provides education. It's never too late, that's exactly right. But it's not ideally not where we want to start the education process, but when we have folks in our custody and the county attorney is also the attorney in the jails, we need to scale the program so that even when people are there for days and weeks, they have the opportunity to get the resources and education they need.
Thank you, Simon. Mary.
Hi, Courtney. You reminded me, when I was Chief Public Defender, I did go to schools. Intermediate District 287 was my favorite because those youth had real questions about what to do when they were stopped, because they were frequently stopped. And that's something I really enjoyed doing. When I did commentary on the George Floyd trial, what I really tried hard to do was to make the system accessible for everybody. Because I understand the system from being in it for 31 years, and I think it's purposely been made mysterious so that people can't ask questions, so that people don't understand it. Because if you understand it, you ask smart questions, like, why are we doing this? Does this work? Show me the data. And that's why I believe it was purposely made mysterious. As county attorney, I will continue to do what I did during the trial and what I've done during this campaign, which is to really try to make the system understandable for everyone. I want everyone in the community to know whatever they need to know about the system so they can ask good questions and hold me accountable. One of the reasons I'm endorsed by several school board members, both in the suburbs and in Minneapolis, is because I spent a lot of time talking to school board members about what they need in schools. And an important part of the county attorney's office is that they handle all the juvenile cases in Hennepin County. And we need to work harder to help our youth so that they don't end up in the system.
Thank you, Mary. All right, we're going to move on to our final. Thank you, Courtney.
I just want to say thank you for showing up, because I think we all know how hard it is to show up sometimes, and it's noticeable who didn't. So thank you.
And I want to say thank you to the families for showing up as well, because I know it's not easy for the families to show up in situations like this. And as Don has mentioned many times, this is not a club you want to be a part of. And you all consistently coming out here means something, the time, spirit, and energy that it takes. So thank you all for being here. We're going to move on to our final question, and then we're going to have closing. Might as well, be here anyways. There's a storm outside. So based off of what everybody has said, I've generated an independent question for each person. So I'm going to ask you that question, and then you'll answer it in 90 seconds. After that's done, we'll go into 2 minutes for closing statements, and that'll be it. So we're going to start with Swati, who's first. So you mentioned many times that you've been in the back of press conferences, you've been out here, you've observed the families. And this is a two-part question. What has it meant to you to see everything unravel, to see the emotions from a lot of these families, to see people show up and say, wow, here we are again, to see the broken promises made, to also see the press conferences from the mayor and from the DA? What has that meant to you to be there? And then also, how do you plan to expand expungement? Go ahead.
I didn't talk about this part yet. My grandfather was a diplomat. That's how he came here. He was in India. He engaged in nonviolent protests against the British to overthrow them. And when he came here to the United States, even though he was a diplomat, There was the white water fountain and the colored water fountain. He had to drink from the colored water fountain. People treated him as if he was black because they didn't even know the difference. With my dad, after 9/11, one of many examples, someone called the police on him, calling him a terrorist, and the officers arrived. And what was his crime? He was a dark man. He's darker than me, and he has a beard. And me, I like those toy water guns, those clear ones. I don't know if they still sell them at the 99-cent store. And one day when I was a kid, 9 years old, my parents sat me down and they said I wasn't allowed to play with it anymore because a little black kid, also 9 years old in my county, was shot and killed. I'm 37 years old. I'm tired of waiting, and it's so upsetting to see so many of you here because it means you were the victims of all these crimes, and it's been going on since well before my grandfather's generation. It's my time, but
You can continue if you want.
I'm so frustrated. And I also think it's time to have a person of color in this office who knows what it's like, who has to deal with it on a daily basis. I've been to prison while being a prosecutor. I changed into civilian clothes to visit my friends. There's so much that's wrong. And you can have justice. You can hold people accountable without killing black people. It's so basic. I'm here because I need to change this. I can't have another kid. No one else should die for this reason. I'm sorry. It's really
That's
painful.
okay. Thank you, Suswati.
Yes.
Simon, I'm going to move on to you. You mentioned earlier that you want to change the culture of the police departments. Derek Chauvin was a police officer who had worked for the Minneapolis Police Department for many years. He was responsible for killing other people other than just George Floyd. He had also shot people and assaulted many others. Derek Chauvin clearly is not in a vacuum, and there are many other cops out there that are like him. Do you honestly believe that you can change the culture of police departments in Hennepin County? And if so, how?
That's one of the most fundamental questions I think we all have to answer, because it has to be a culture change and not just an individual policy change. I'm so honored to have the endorsement of George Floyd's family. And I think it changes because we get the policy right, but it also changes because we relocate empathy in places that it's never been in our criminal justice system and our public safety system. We had a dialogue with a retired police officer that's also a lay minister. And when we began to talk about police violence, he had a full body, I would call it a triggered response. His face contorted. He began to shout. He threatened to leave the room because I was talking about my friend who was a victim of abduction and assault by the Minneapolis Police Department. And what he was upset about was not that a young child was assaulted by the government and abducted by the government. What he was upset about is that we used the word police violence. And he came up, to his credit, he threatened to leave the conversation. He did not leave the conversation. He said, I will leave, and I told him, I hope you won't. And we had the conversation. He came up afterwards, and I told him, I said, you're not talking to me as a minister right now. You're talking to me actually as a police officer. And he came up afterwards. He said, you're right. I became a cop in that moment. And then he said something else. He said, what you said happened to your friend sounds like something that would have happened when I was on the force. But here's the problem. His empathy, even though he knew that those stories had the ring of truth, his empathy was for the idea of law enforcement over the trauma that happened to that child. And so every day you can count on me not to let it go. There's no tough conversation that I won't continue to have. You can count on me to get the policy right, but it has to be more than the policy.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Mary Moriarty, you said that you would create a do not call list for officers that have lied in court. I wanted to first ask you, How long do you think that no-call list would be right now? And then lastly, how would you pivot from being a public defender to being a prosecutor? 90 seconds.
So 6-7 years ago, the Minneapolis Police Department was part of the national initiative. They were one of 6 police departments, and I invited myself to go to procedural justice training. It was me and 20 cops one Saturday. And we were at 3 different tables, and right before we started, a lieutenant who was at my table said, "This is fucking bullshit and a fucking waste of my fucking time." And then he sabotaged every small table thing we tried to do. And then later in the day, they were all asked, "What are your goals for the next year?" And this guy stood up and said, "I want to maintain the warrior mentality because that's why I became a cop." And I knew right then and there, this is a cultural problem. It's not a bad apple problem, it's a cultural problem. And it's going to take a lot of people, not just MPD, to make this work. And the do not call list has to be part of it. That if police leadership won't hold people accountable, if the post board, which is their licensing board, has no teeth, prosecutors need to step up to the plate, and I will not call certain police officers. I have a few seconds left to talk about how will I pivot as a public defender. I actually, as a public defender, have had a better view of the system than anybody else. I've watched prosecutors. And prosecutors often see things, they think there's somebody who's a perpetrator and somebody who's a stereotypical victim, and they never cross. And I don't look at it that way. I see everybody's humanity, and I know I'm out of time there, so thank you.
Okay, and lastly, Jarvis, well, Mary, if you want to finish up, just give us 30 more seconds, because we gave extra time to Simon and Mr. Swatton.
So yeah, human beings are complex. The clients I represented over a period of years, I did social histories on, and they were victims. They were harmed themselves. And had we intervened early on in their lives, they probably would have been sitting next to me. They were the victims. And so lots of victims that come in end up being sitting next to me because their trauma is never addressed. And so I bring with me a more complex, nuanced understanding of who the people are that are in the system and how we need to interrupt their trauma so that they don't, especially youth, continue to cycle in and out of the system.
Jarvis, you've mentioned several times the Justice Investigation, the Independent Investigation Crime Unit that you've planned on. You also addressed that to review past cases, you would need to be well-staffed and well-funded. Minneapolis Police Department has been well-staffed and well-funded, as well as the St. Paul Police Department, many other police departments, and yet have still resulted in some of the nation's topping racial disparity in law enforcement, which seems that staffing and funding may just be exacerbating the issue, especially for Black folks and folks in under-resourced neighborhoods, people of color. For your outside of funding and staffing, what will the Independent Investigation Crime Unit do in the system that you mentioned needs to be changed?
Yeah, those are 2 different units. The Independent Investigation Unit will investigate police officers. It will investigate prosecutors. It will investigate judges who violate the law. So that's very different. I wasn't talking about funding for that. We will have funding for that. So that's a different group than the Independent Investigation Unit. What I also said is that, so I hope I answered your question. That's not the Independent Investigation Unit. If you want to see what I'm going to do, because I'm very familiar with what needs to be done, I ask that you look at these plans. You will see it thought out. They ain't just made up. We're not going to make the changes that we need playing around the edges. Folks keep talking about they're going to talk to this person, talk to that person. Wow, I'm probably older than most of you here at this table. It is what it is. I've heard this forever. It's because we got 2 systems of justice. I'm not remotely saying I alone, as the prosecutor, will be able to change it. No folks up here can do that alone. We have to partner with the key stakeholders. I'm putting in place a working task force. I'll convene a task force of the key stakeholders in the criminal system. It's all here. That will be the public defender's office. That will be the prosecutor's office. That will be law enforcement. And that will be judiciary. I encourage you to look on the website. You will see I've done this when I was president of State Bar, Hennepin County Bar, MMLA. I'm not just talking. Go to highlights. See what I have accomplished. We need systemic changes, people. I've been hearing this about these changes since the Kerner report. Forever, and so have you. So this is nothing new. If you think we're gonna get to where we need to by making little changes around the edges, so I'm not saying I'm gonna do it. We gonna do it together, and we're gonna hold all the stakeholders accountable. That's what we need to do together. I need some volunteer bridge builders who want to work together, who want to harness that energy when George Floyd was senselessly murdered. We can do this, but we're not going to do it playing around the edges. And I'm sorry, folks. I've been hearing this stuff forever because the system isn't set up to treat people of color, poor people, the same. And so changing a little policy here, changing a little policy there, ain't gonna get it. So if you want someone to play around the edges, I'm not your person. But if you think I'm just talking, go to JarvisJonesForHennepin.com, go to highlights, you will see for 20 years I've been a change agent building bridges.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to wrap up with 2-minute closing statements. And I appreciate everybody for sticking with us. Simon, you're first and you have 2 minutes.
All right.
To give your closing statement. Go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you again to the Minnesota Justice Coalition and so many people that I care so much about. I'm glad we're all safe here. You can know how I'm going to lead because you can look at how I've led. You can look at how I've led in community. You can look at how I've led in government, how we have transformed our expungement process to make it a default part of the plea bargaining process so that people who have been held accountable can transcend all the collateral consequences, or I should say most of the collateral consequences of having a criminal record. You can count on me because of my leadership as a lawyer, leading other lawyers and teams of lawyers, not just to do criminal justice work, but work with Black and brown and BIPOC folks in every part of their lives. An important consideration of the Hennepin County Attorney's Office is the criminal office, but also the civil office. If it matters to you that we have equity in transportation and child protective services, in home and health and human services, if it matters to you that we have equity and justice in our jails, the lawyer that's responsible for that is responsible for leading competent lawyers in multiple areas of law. I've done that. I could do that anywhere. I do that in Elliott Park. It's where I was born. It's where I've lived. It's where I've built my firm. It's where I lead lawyers and serve people. I'm so honored to have the support of incredible community leaders like George Floyd's family, like Bishop Richard Howell at Shiloh Temple, but also suburban mayors like Maria Reagan Gonzalez and Ron Case. We have to have a mighty and powerful and diverse conversation so we can change things at a fundamental level. You can count on me not just to get the policy right. That policy is critical, but you can count on me, and I think you see through these kinds of conversations how committed I am to having tough conversations, having them thoroughly, and healing and repairing at the other end of that. Vote for me, Simon Troutman for County Attorney.
Thank you, Simon.
And the reason you hear specific ideas from me is because I've lived this my entire 31-year career. I have been in public service my entire career. As I said, I tried cases for 20 years. I tried about 13 murder cases. I watched prosecutors. I know Hennepin County really well. As I mentioned, I was chair of the Behavioral Health Committee. And one of the things that really helped me see was working in Hennepin County leadership. As I think somebody mentioned, at the beginning, Hennepin County did declare a public health crisis. Hennepin County does talk about racial disparities a lot. But I understand how that county system works. I understand who the people are in the system who do not want change despite what they say. I get that because I worked with them for 6 years, and so I can step right in and know who the people are that want to get stuff done. I was also chief public defender for 6 years, so I am the only person who's run a large law office of over 120 lawyers. That was actually the second largest public law office in the state. The county attorney's office is the largest. Leadership, you could be a leader in any position, but management is very different. Leading a large law office is very different. And in 2019, the National Center for State Courts did a study on our office and found us to be one of the best public defender's offices in the country. And that's what I plan on doing when I become Hennepin County Attorney. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Jarvis, 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Why I'm running for office is because we need a fundamental change here. No, I can't tell you I've been in the criminal system 25, 30 years. I don't think it's something worth bragging about. And that's nothing against people here. Everyone here will do an excellent job, and you're fortunate. Particularly Mary, I have tremendous respect. I told her that. She is a true believer, and she fights for the people. Period. And this young lady, impressed. But why I'm asking to vote for me is because I'm a change agent. We need to change. We need a new phase, a new beginning. We don't need the same people telling us they've been in 25, 30 years. It's time for a change. We need someone who could go into particularly our troubled neighborhood, who look like some of these young men here, who came from that neighborhood, who can speak to them, who can listen to them, who don't need a translator, who actually has a friend who was brutally murdered. Many friends who come from, when I go back home to Chicago, my family still live on the same side of the tracks. Don't let this bow tie fool you. That's what I'm talking about. I think the choices are clear. Same old, getting up here saying we're going to change this policy or that. I'm telling you folks, all you know, I'm speaking the truth. We've been talking about this stuff forever, and it hasn't changed. And so people up here, oh my God, the law, I can't believe what happened. I bet no one here is thinking they can't believe how people of color are treated. The issue isn't what's going on in what is going on in the community. We know what's going on. We know it firsthand. So when I keep hearing people talking about, oh, this is terrible, it is terrible. The only question we have is what we're going to do about it. That's the only question. And that's what I'm about, making fundamental systemic changes. I'll end on this. There's a saying, only a particular type of person thinks doing the same old thing, having the same old people, is going to lead to something different. Well, I'm different. I'm not that different, but I'm different. And I ask for Jarvis Jones, I ask for your vote for change. Who can go into these communities and talk to some of our troubled young men, because I came from that neighborhood. They need to see some role models. Who's going to live out there in the community, not just go out there.
Thank you, Jarvis.
Thank you, sir.
Responsible.
Thank you. My name is Singh, and I'm running for Hennepin County Attorney. My priorities are police accountability, racial equity, and public safety. And with police accountability, that's a public safety issue. My issues within police accountability are, one, I'm going to charge officers when they commit a crime. I'm going to make sure they're held accountable when they abuse their power. I'm going to embed a prosecutor with the Minneapolis Police Department because they need the training and I don't trust the training that they have. Third, prosecutors view the body cam, they view the footage. Whenever they see anything, even just inappropriate, reporting it directly to me, so I go directly to the police department. That's the only way that there's going to be change. I am a prosecutor in the Ramsey County Attorney's Office. I handle murder, sexual assault, domestic assault cases, and everything in between. I work with victims. I know the system. I joined the system so I could learn it, so then I could change it. That's why I'm here. I worked at the Minnesota Attorney General's office doing both criminal and civil. The Hennepin County Attorney's Office does both criminal and civil. I've worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office handling civil rights cases. I've worked at legal aid handling Social Security disability cases. I've done the work. I also have leadership experience. Governor Walz appointed me to the Council of Asian Pacific Minnesotans. I oversee a state agency. I have won national leadership awards. I've won a national endorsement, the only candidate in the race to win a national endorsement from a progressive organization. I've won both endorsements from both leaders of the Posse Caucus. So that includes Representative Esther Bajay, who represents North Minneapolis and downtown Minneapolis, and the wonderful Representative Athena Hollins. My name is Singh, and I'm running for Hennepin County Attorney. I'm a progressive prosecutor, a Hindu, and the daughter of Indian immigrants. And I'm going to bring all of that experience with me. And I know I look young. I'm 37. I'm the same age as Amy Klobuchar when she first ran and won for Hennepin County Attorney. She was the first woman in that office. I'm going to be the first woman of color. Let's make change together. Let's make history together. Please join me.
Josephine, thank you so much. And I want to thank everybody for being here and showing up. Not all the candidates showed up, but if you ask anybody that's been out here in these streets and been out here at these press conferences and been out here just in general, showing up is the fundamental number one thing you can do. And not everybody can actually do it physically or financially they can. So it's a privilege to do that, but it's also an amazing thing to have you all here. So thank you to all the candidates that showed up today. And we look forward to seeing you campaigns down the road. Thank you everybody for being here. Thank you to Jonathan for putting us on, the Untitled Justice Coalition. We'll see you in the next forum.
I'm running for the best dancer in Minnesota.
That's the first. All right, later.